Welcome to another episode of Extreme Expat Stories of Thailand. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and for sticking with Extreme Expat Stories of Thailand. Since July of this year, I've been posting 3 videos a week for this channel, driven by a simple idea to share raw, honest stories from expats who came to Thailand chasing sunlight, second chances, or a quieter life. Your support has kept this channel alive and made it possible for those voices to be heard. I read every email I receive, and I know how much trust it takes to send your story or to listen. While I strive to vet each submission carefully, I must be clear. I can't guarantee the absolute authenticity of every account. Many stories are anonymized, some are incomplete, and a few may be blended with memory or emotion. My job, and my promise to you, is to filter, research, and present these tales with respect and care so they spark empathy, understanding, and conversation. I cross check details when possible, consult community forums and public records, and remove identifying information to protect submitters. But I always encourage healthy skepticism and open discussion in the comments and publish any corrections. If you've been here since the beginning, thank you. If you're new, welcome. Whether you've lived abroad, are thinking about moving, or simply love human stories, this channel is for you. Please keep sending emails, tips, and corrections. They help me improve how these narratives are told. If a story moves you, consider liking, sharing, or leaving a comment. It helps others find these voices. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening, for caring, and for helping build a community that treats difficult truths with compassion. I'll keep showing up 3 times a week with more stories, more lessons, and more honest conversations. Hello. I don't normally write emails like this. I don't post on forums. I don't ask for help. But I have watched your videos for months. The quiet, gravelly voice narrations of other men who came looking for golden light and found something else. And I feel like if anyone should tell this, it should be you. I'm asking you to read this on your channel, to tell my story just once to people who need to hear it. Please keep my name out of the video. Call me G, call me Tom, call me what you want. I can't afford attention anymore. Only the truth. This is long. It has to be. I will try to be honest and spare no small detail, because the things that feel like small mistakes are the ones that, strung together, destroyed my life. I was 57 when I booked the one-way ticket. I grew up in a gray, working-class English town. I spent 35 years in the same trade: diesel engines and cranes, cold offices with blueprints and fluorescent lights. I married my high school sweetheart. We bought a modest house. We had 2 kids who left when they were old enough. I did what men of my generation did: worked, kept quiet, tried not to make trouble. Life was orderly and safe in a way that felt like a warm coat. Then my wife got sick. It was fast, cruel, and the kind of quiet that keeps extending its fingers into a life until there's nothing left to hold on to. After she died, the house felt far bigger and far quieter than any house should. People told me to go to grief counselors, to find a group, to talk. I tried. It didn't help like the idea of leaving did. I wanted the sun. I wanted a place where the air smelled of jasmine and oil and the nights were full of strangers with music in their pockets. I wanted to stop having portraits on the mantle and stop feeling like everything I'd built was measured in the space between the fridge and the kettle. So I sold the house. I sold the car. I cashed a modest pension and walked into an airport with one bag and a cheap camera. Everything I owned at that point fit into two suitcases: an old pair of boots, some shirts, a small stack of photographs, and 3 or 4 sentimental objects I could not throw away. Bangkok at first felt like being let out into the sun after a long winter. The city is loud and messy and alive in a way that shook me awake. There are temples glittering like jewelry, motorbikes weaving in lines I thought would make me dizzy, street stalls where the food hit the wrong part of my lungs the way a good story does, right in the chest. I rented a small condo near the river, a place with a fan and an AC that rattled at night, a balcony where I learned to watch storms roll in over the skyline and feel something like peace. I'll be honest, I expected to be isolated at first. What surprised me was how quickly I made friends. There were other older men who wandered the same Saturday morning markets, retirees with folded maps and faded tattoos and stories about how things used to be. There were locals who ran the noodle stalls and smiled like they meant it. I felt, for a while, cherished by a city that didn't ask me for anything but my company. And then, over a couple of months, a quieter hunger crept in. It was not wanting to eat, it was wanting to belong. The expat bars were full of men who talked the same way I thought I sounded: lonely, amused, a little evasive. I'd go and drink and laugh at jokes that weren't very funny while watching neon blink through the steam and smoke. I did what many others did. I started to feel invincible in a way that belonged to wealthy men I'd watched on TV. I called my son once and he said, "Dad, are you sure about this?" I said I was fine. I lied to him because I didn't want to hear his worry in his voice. There was a woman, because there always is in these stories. And I will try to tell this without embellishment because the truth is worse than any lie I could invent. I met her at a Muay Thai gym. She was in her late 20s, small, quick, with a laugh like bell metal. She sold bracelets and worked at a small cafe on the other side of town. She listened to me the way someone listens when they think they can fix things with a hand on a shoulder. She called me Mr. G, which made me laugh and feel younger than my knees allowed. She liked walking early in the morning by the river. She liked papaya salad prepared hot as the sun. She told me stories about her family: a mother with bad knees, a younger brother who had difficulty finding steady work, a daughter from a previous relationship whom she adored. I knew in those small, private ways a man knows when he is in over his head that the gulf between us was enormous. She grew up in a life where every baht mattered. I had spent most of my life thinking money was a right rather than a responsibility. But love, or the desire for love, is a dangerous anesthetic. I wanted to be needed. I wanted the evenings when she wrapped a blanket around my shoulders because a sudden rain had chilled the bones of the city. I ignored the cautious articles I'd read on forums about relationships of convenience because I was not a tourist. I was a man in mourning who wanted to re-enter the world. Within 6 months, I had given her more than I should have. I helped fix the little cafe. I paid for a wall to be painted. I bought a second-hand scooter she could ride to work. I wired money to her mother when her brother couldn't find a day of labor. I told myself I was being generous. What I was, in unadorned truth, was trying to patch the hole sadness had torn in me. There is a common online phrase that sounds cynical. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. I read it in forums and on message boards and laughed because what did I know? I also read, in the privacy of glassy forum threads, about men who had been taken, not quickly, not only once, but slowly, as loans and renovations and promises accumulated into mortgages they couldn't manage and obligations they could not untangle. You can find those accounts online. The man who thought he'd bought a house and realized the deeds were never in his name. The man who left with nothing. I remember dismissing those stories as horror tales until I lived one. The twist came the afternoon I realized she had a child I had never met. It is strange how the hard parts come as unassuming moments. She told me one night that her daughter might come to stay for a week. I thought that would be wonderful. I bought toys. I bought a small second-hand bicycle. I imagined laughing voices in an apartment that had been so quiet for so long. Later that week, she told me the child could not visit because of family troubles. And then another week later, she said the child had already visited and left, and she would be bringing her by to see the river the following weekend. The details were always just out of reach. Small patches of a story that would never quite stitch together. When I pressed, when I asked for a clear day and a time, I found that the name on some of the documents she showed me was different than the name she had first told me. I asked about the legalities of buying property on her family land. I asked about putting things in writing. She smiled and said, like so many who smile before a small, polite deception, "You are worrying like my mother. Come on, Mr. G. Enjoy the sun." I mortgaged my savings, not the entire pension, but enough to look like a man who had money to help improve the family house. I paid to repair the roof, to purchase cement for the floor, to buy a few appliances. She insisted the deeds would remain in her mother's name and that we would be fine. I was told by a local friend that foreigners cannot own land outright in Thailand without complex arrangements. I dismissed his caution because the woman said she trusted me and because I wanted to trust myself. I wanted to be the kind of man who could provide. 2 months later, when I went to the house with keys in my pocket because she had promised me the weekend away by the beach and dinner was already booked, the house was locked. Her mother had moved out. She'd left. Her phone went to voicemail. The scooter? Gone. The appliances? Gone. The small second-hand bicycle I had bought for the child? Gone. I sat on the curb and watched other people walk past and thought, with a precision that felt sharp as a knife, that I had been had. My shame in that hour was like a sickness. People on forums write sadly about shame with clinical detachment, as if shame is a concept to analyze. It is not. Shame sits heavy in your chest like an animal. It is the feeling that you have misread your own life, that you have been both gullible and greedy, both generous and stupid. I could not bear to call my son and tell him I had been taken. I could barely tell him that I had been foolish. I worried that if I told him the truth about the renovations, about the scooter, about the wiring of money, he would finally see me as what I had come to feel like, an old man who had failed to look after himself. But losing money did not end there. The bar I had bought on a whim, another of those retirement projects, in a rumor-laden forum thread, began to hemorrhage customers. I thought owning a small place where tourists could come, drink, and not look at the weather would be manageable. I had not understood the local business climate, the shifting rents, the neighbors who demanded favors, the small, everyday corruption that is not dramatic but managerial and slow. My English was not worth much when it came to dealing with paperwork. A landlord raised the rent. A supplier shorted me on rice. There were rumors that my staff preferred someone else's tips. Every time I tried to steady the ship, two new holes opened in the hull. As the depth grew, so did my isolation. I began to drink in the afternoon to make the evenings less intrusive. The first drink tasted like nostalgia, the second like relief, and the third like a promise to myself that maybe tomorrow would be better. I hid flasks of cheap whiskey in the bottom of the closet and told myself these were the tools of survival. I stopped going to the Muay Thai gym. I stopped answering calls from people who might offer a lifeline. I was embarrassed. I was too proud to return home empty handed. There are terrible little bureaucratic compromises that take place when a man isolates himself in a foreign place with dwindling funds. Your visa stamps blur together. You learn to cross one line and hope another holds. You exchange money in alleys with acquaintances. You begin to explain your lack of paperwork with jokes. You start to accept things you would never accept back home. One morning, a neighbor banged on my door. She was a woman in her 40s named Somsri, who ran a laundry downstairs and who, for reasons I never fully understood, had always treated me like a lost brother. She had discovered that a bailiff had been to my bar, that payments had been missed, and that papers were being served. She shoved a bag of steamed rice and some boiled eggs at me and said, "Eat." Her hands were rough, and she did not ask how I managed to get into this mess. She worked without complaint, the kind of person who keeps a city alive. I tried to sell what I could. The scooter was gone. The restaurant furniture was bought by someone who paid me pennies on the dollar. I held auction in my mind and let the world take what it could. My passport was still in my pocket. I could have left. I did not. The gut-wrenching twist, the thing I had not told anyone until the last year, is that the woman I had loved was not entirely a thief in the common sense. She was desperate. And part of what she did was simply survival in a society that often treats women with children as commodities. The version of events that makes me the victim also makes her a casualty. There was a rumor, half whispered and poisonous, that she had been promised a marriage to another man in a neighboring province who could give her the security I could not. I heard that she had been pressured by her family and by her own fear into choosing what would keep her daughters safe. I do not excuse the way she left. I will never forgive the empty apartment, the lost scooter, the names written on papers that were not mine. But part of the sorrow I carry with me is the knowledge that she was not a cartoon villain. She was a woman boxed in by a life where childhood decisions shape adult depths. I had wanted to be the hero in her story and instead became the pig who paid. After she left, other things collapsed faster than I thought possible. The business closed. The landlords took back the place. The bank closed the accounts and reported overdue payments. I called my son in desperation one night because I had 23 baht left in my pocket and I needed a phone card. Something I can only say now without shame because I have practiced saying shame out loud. He sent me a small sum. He asked me to come home. "We can help," he said. And for 1 week I really tried. I called a taxi to the airport. I walked as if I had purchased repentance itself. But there was a part of me that could not bring myself to pack the small trash I had left and climb onto a plane as a failure. I don't know which thought was worse. The look my children might give me if they saw my unglued hands, or the sound of their pity. I could not bear either. So I stayed. I found a room in an old building. Mildew smell, one fan that rattled, a patchwork mattress. For what I could afford, a few $100 a week. I took odd jobs helping tourists carry luggage, translating for a pharmacy, cutting fruit at a market stall. I learned humility the way a body learns to walk again after a fall. Slowly, with pain, with stumbles. The other cruel twist, and this one confirms what message boards often say about the cruel logic of small economies, is that I could have left earlier had I not been embarrassed by my failure. You tend to imagine, when you are doing well, that shame is a remote emotion. It isn't. Shame is a constant companion that makes good choices seem impossible. I had also allowed my pride to calcify into cunning. I thought I could outmaneuver a faith that was not only financial but existential. I believed I could rebuild with what I had left. I could not. There are other things I have done in the last 3 years that I do not speak of in public forums. I tried, in a poorly considered moment, to ask for loans on websites I had no business touching. I answered messages from men who promised quick cash and told me what my name should be. A man once suggested I invest in a scheme that promised returns from an import-export business. I told myself it was a game of ingenuity, and I lost. If there is any kindness in the world, I would ask that people not take what I did as universal truth, but do take it as a cautionary tale. Sometimes I think about the man I used to be, precise about bolt sizes, about the timing of machinery, a man who could hold an argument neat and low-voiced, a man who taught his son to be careful with a wrench. Now I sit by the river with a cardboard cup of tea and watch the ferry boats pass. And in the reflection I see a version of myself that time is slowly eating away. The last, hardest part to confess is the end of my marriage of memory. My family did not know the whole truth. I had not told them how much money I had actually spent. I told them I had a modest nest egg, that I was happy. Shame made me lie. I was also afraid. Men of my age and class do not like to ask for help. It is a cultural thing, perhaps a generational thing, perhaps a personal blindness. I could have called and said I made a mistake. I could have come home with nothing but a story. I did not. So now the reason I am begging you to read this on your channel is not because I want sympathy. I need to warn people. I need younger men to hear the voice of someone who did not listen to the warnings that are everywhere if you look for them. I need people to know that the small, repeated errors that feel private and forgivable become a chain. I want listeners to understand 3 things, plain and blunt, that I learned the hard way. Do not mix love and money. Anything that promises to please the heart and the bank at the same time is usually rigged to please only one. If you find someone you care about, help in ways that are limited, documented, and reversible. Never add a mortgage clause to love. There are legal channels for protection. Use them. There are people who will point you to a lawyer. Listen to them. Legal and financial advice is not optional. I thought it was expensive or cumbersome. It is not as expensive as losing the roof over your head. Don't trust casual assurances or half-comforting smiles that say, "We'll be fine." Papers matter. names matter. Put everything in writing that involves money. Pride can be lethal. I stayed in Thailand longer than I should have because I could not face my family and admit I had failed. Pride fogged my decision making and fed my desperation. Ask for help early. Let people see your mistakes while they can still be remedied. I am not dead. I'm still living these days like a man trying to braid his frayed edges back together. Sometimes I teach English to tourists for a few dollars a lesson. Sometimes I clean tables in the early morning when no one is watching and the city is still cool. I keep a small notebook with me where I write names of people I met on the river and phrases that still sound beautiful. I've started to plant a tiny herb garden on my balcony in old cups. Basil, coriander, and a little chili. It is a ridiculous, stubborn thing to do when you have little left, but it gives me a reason to touch life with my fingertips and not only to remember it. If I were to end on the strongest, most brutal truth of all, it is this. Losing everything does not always arrive as an earthquake. More often it arrives as a series of small slips. A scooter here, a renovation contract there, a drink too many, a lie to the son you love, and then suddenly the water is over your head and you are not a man who fell but a man who drifted. And drifting is a slow, lonely thing. The other reason I am writing this is because I want to confess something dumb, human, and possibly unforgivable. The night before I found the apartment empty, I sat on the balcony and watched the city lights and thought I had found the version of myself I'd always deserved. I thought grief had been replaced by laughter. The pain came not because a person left, but because I had wanted to be needed and I had become the kind of man who would hand over his independence in order to buy the feeling of not being alone. That is the thing I cannot ever fix. Please, if you decide to publish this, do it with care. Tell people their names can change. Make it anonymous. I do not want to be famous. I want to be useful. Even if all I can offer is the map of a man's failures, so someone else won't walk the same path. If any of your listeners want to write back, I cannot really reveal my identity, but I would read any messages you might collect and pass them along to me anonymously. I am not looking for donations. I'm looking for the chance that one person hears me and decides to take a plane home early, to pick up the phone, to sign a document with a lawyer besides them. Finally, a small detail that still makes me cry sometimes. One of the last things my wife said the evening before she died was, "If you ever go somewhere sunny, don't forget to bring a hat." I brought the hat. I wore it when I walked the river. There were days it shielded me from the rain. There were days the sun baked me until the hat could not keep it out. I think of that hat now as a small human talisman I took to a country that could not keep me safe from my own mistakes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the honest, patient way you tell other people's stories. If this helps one man choose differently, then all of this, the long shame, the nights of cheap whiskey, the quiet work of hauling luggage in the haze of dawn, will not be entirely in vain. Keep the name of the channel as the header. Keep the story anonymous. Keep it slow. Let the footage show the river at dawn, the Muay gym at dusk, the empty table at a cafe where once there was laughter. With respect and a very tired heart, a long-time subscriber, please call me G.